All right. Well, mahalo everyone for joining us tonight. It's just a little after 5:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah and I will be your MC for tonight's talk. Month, we're joined by Maria Harvey of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. And tonight, Maria is going to be sharing stories with us. She'll dive into the history of response efforts and share strategies that are used by authorized entanglement responders when it comes to large whale entanglement happening in Hawaii. And so I hope you're excited to learn some of the ways that you can help if you come across a situation like this, and what the future for large whale entanglement looks like in the Hawaiian Islands. Thank you for being here. And tonight's presentation is part of our monthly speaker series, typically held on the first Wednesday of every month at 5:30 via Zoom. And this is something that's been supported for a while now by the County of Maui. So we want to mahalo them for continuing to partner with us to be able to bring these types of talks to you. As a side note, if you haven't already signed up for our monthly newsletter, it's called the Reef and Brief. And because we have these talks every month, plus, many other things, if you'd like to sign up for that, there'll be a link in the chat a little bit later, and you can go ahead and get signed up so that when we have future talks, you can be notified. Um, And a little bit about us. We're the Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. We've been working for clean ocean water, healthy coral reefs, and abundant native fish since 2007. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we believe that everything in our island home is connected. And so, although our main focus is on preserving these beautiful reefs that we have, that means so much to us in so many ways, this means doing work on the land and in the ocean. And so that means doing things like testing water quality at 39 locations across the island, monitoring through survey dives the fish and reef population, and most recently that means teaching landscaping professionals how to adopt natural practices that will be better not just for the plants but also for our reefs. And so, speaking of, did you know, I didn't know this, did you know that in this year alone, one new species is introduced to the islands every 3 days? 20 plus new insects are introduced every year, and over 12,000 non-native plants, 200, over 200 of which are invasive, are introduced into the Hawaiian Islands. And this is, or into Maui, and this is coming from the Maui Invasive Species Committee. That's kind of a mind-blowing number. I didn't know this, certainly. And according to the Northeast Organic Farming Association, or NOFA, the primary source, at least on the continent, of introducing new invasives is the landscaping industry. Of course, here in Hawaii, there are many other sources like boats and airplanes, things like that, but it should still make us pause and consider the impact that all of the landscaping activities that go on our island, at our homes, at resorts, condos, all of these things, like what is the impact that those activities have on our ecosystem in light of this information. And so I didn't know any of this prior to viewing the native plant section of our reef friendly landscaping course. And this is why I'm actually really excited to share with you guys that the last and final course for the year, there'll be more next year, but for the year will open for enrollment tomorrow. Um, this will be a hybrid course, and it's a combination of virtual instruction and in-person work days. And it will cover 10 topics, including and where I got this information, including native, exotic, and invasive plants, energy and pollution and climate change, and a whole host of things that I'm not going to go over right now. But we all know how fragile our ecosystems are here. And so let's do our part to make sure that at least through our landscaping activities that we're doing our part to make sure we're helping and not hurting this beautiful place that we call home. So if you're interested, or if you want, if there's condo associations, all kinds of places where we have landscaping activities, you can go to mauireefs.org/RFL, and enrollment for this course to learn this information, and so much more, will open tomorrow, and it will run from November 13th to the 19th. So just 5 days of time can really make a difference in our landscaping industry. We also want to share that our water quality monitoring program, Hui o Ola, has openings on their South Maui team. So if there's any of you who want to make sure that reliable information about the waters around Maui are available for our community, please email huiokavaiola@gmail.com and they can get you all set up. Or you can even just message me throughout this talk or at the end or something, and I'll help to get you connected to Hui o Ola. All right, so just a few notes before we introduce Maria. As per usual, right now we're live streaming to Facebook and we are also recording tonight's presentation. So it will be available for viewing a few days from now. Another perk of being on our mailing list is I do send out a recording. You'll be notified if you have to hop off early or if you want to share this talk with someone later on. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the talk, so please submit your questions to that little Q&A button at the bottom, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time that we have left. Okay, so now for tonight's speaker, Maria Harvey of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary earned her degree, her bachelor's in marine science from the University of Hawaii in 2009. And she's right now working on her graduate degree in fish, wildlife, and conservation biology. Go, Maria. She's worked as a captain, naturalist, expedition guide, assistant researcher, and a level 4 marine animal disentanglement specialist. Very impressive. In recent years, Maria formed the Hawaii Uncharted Research Collective, pardon me, which is a nonprofit that couples her research and education background with her love for the Hawaiian Islands, ocean conservation, and the charismatic whale sharks that inhabit the deep blue waters of the Pacific. So she has an educational and professional experience. Those things brought her to Linker in support of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary and their large whale health monitoring and disentanglement efforts. So she's already here. You can see her. Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And the floor is yours. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Jill. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Maui Nui Resource Council for having me. I'm going to share my screen real fast and get this presentation going. All right, hopefully that all looks good. So again, thank you for having me. Today I'm going to be talking about large whale entanglement response in the Hawaiian Islands and give you a little bit of the background and kind of where we're going from here. So I know Sarah gave me that lovely introduction, but yeah, again, my name's Maria. I went to the University of Hawaii, spent many years on the Big Island in Kona, where I worked as a captain, crew for Captain Zodiac out of Kona. Before bouncing up to Alaska and then to the Northeast to learn disentanglement techniques. So if anyone is from the Cape Cod area or the Northeast, I worked in Provincetown, Massachusetts for the Center for Coastal Studies for 5 years, where I got to work with North Atlantic right whales, humpback whales, fin whales, minkies, leatherback turtles, as you see in the photo, before coming back to the Hawaiian Islands to join the sanctuary here and do the same thing that I was doing out in the Northeast, just here with the humpbacks. So, and I'm working with Ed Lyman. If any of you have been to one of his wonderful presentations or have met him in the past, I am kind of his right-hand woman here at the sanctuary. So just to give you a little overview of the presentation before I dive in, going to be talking about bycatch and gear kind of configuration. So you understand later in the presentation when I'm stating something, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. Dive into the worldwide entanglement overview, do a history of disentanglement, and then talk about response efforts, how we go about a response, show you some photos, videos, and then talk about the going forward and have some time for questions. Hopefully I'll fit this all into about 45 minutes. But diving in, bycatch, usually I kind of toss this out to the group and ask if anyone knows what bycatch is. But basically, I'll just give you a short explanation that if, say, someone is fishing for tuna and you accidentally hook a dolphin on the fluke or anything of that sort, that is considered bycatch. So anything that you're not going for, not your target species. So what I'm going to highlight is a couple of the things that we see commonly out there in the disentanglement world. And the first thing I like to highlight is fixed gear. These are your pots, traps, and trawls. This is going to be lobster, crab gear. So what you're looking at right here in this image is going to be a trawl. So this is mini traps on the seafloor connected to two inlines. And I'm going to move my mouse and hopefully you all can see this. But The line going from the sea surface to the sea floor is called an inline. There's a buoy and a pickup buoy. And depending on the fisherman, they can fish 10, 20, 30, 40 pot trawls. It just depends on what they like to fish. Now, if it's a single pot, it may look like something like this, where you have the single pot, the inline going up to the pickup buoy on the sea surface. Now, when the animals are swimming along, they can become entangled through their mouth if they're feeding, around a pectoral fin, flukes, and then they can kind of roll and wrap up their entire body. Now, to give you an idea of kind of the pressure that we see in some areas, this is a photo that we took off Maine, and I'm going to highlight every buoy with an inline going down to the sea floor with a yellow dot. So just to keep in mind, this is just one photo. And unfortunately, where humans feed and whales feed are the same area. You'll see this off the Northeast in Alaska, many areas around the US. And just because I'm talking about the US, this is a global issue. Entanglement is a global issue. And I will be talking a lot about fishing, but that is just because what I have seen most commonly out there in this field. But anything human-made in the water column will entangle an animal. Another kind of gear that we see, or gear type that we see, I'm going to kind of lump them all together, but derelict gear, fads, and moorings. So this could be trash, debris in the water column, moorings, obviously boat moorings, or anchors. So this image that you're seeing is actually of a humpback whale from Balcam. The eyeball is in the upper right corner, and this animal was feeding underneath a vessel, closed its mouth on the anchor chain and spun. So you kind of see that knot on the upper left side of the photo. So again, it's anything in their water column that unfortunately they will become entangled in. This is a photo of a fad. So for those of you that don't know, fishing aggregate devices, we have a lot of them throughout the state of Hawaii. But a lot of people will make individual fads or illegal fads that they put out into the water column to create an ecosystem that they can fish around. This was an illegal fad that a juvenile humpback picked up here in Hawaii off Maui. And that's 700 pounds of brake rotors that someone has put down to anchor the fad, basically. And then, of course, I'll be speaking a lot to large whales, but moorings, boat moorings affect all animals, all species of marine animals. And this is a photo of a leatherback turtle that became entangled in a mooring, and then the tide went out. So jumping into the worldwide entanglement overview, just to give you an idea, we get a lot of questions about how many whales does entanglement affect. And I will be honest with you, it varies dependent on location. So here in Hawaii, it ranges around 13 to 15% for a study period in the past 10 years-ish. And what I mean by our scar rate is if you see these photos up above, we can monitor the animals from year to year and get an idea of the population and how many have interacted with something human-made in the water column from year to year. So we can see how their body changes or how the scars change over time. Now, here in Hawaii, again, it ranges, around 15%, 20%. In the Gulf of Maine, off of the Northeast, that can be 80% in some species, especially with the North Atlantic right whale, humpbacks as well. Now, we continue these scarring studies, and we're working on putting out a paper. So I'll happily share that with you all when we do that. But with the scarring, sometimes animals can be entangled for an hour, and you'll get scarring that lasts for the rest of their life, or they can be entangled for multiple months to years. It just depends. So that's what we're out when we're doing research. We're collecting all of these images to assess which animals have been entangled in their lifetime. Now, when and where does this occur? Again, anywhere that the animals will overlap with something human-made. So that can be in their feeding grounds, their breeding grounds, or while they're migrating. Now, how can entanglement kill a whale? I'm going to try and go through this slide quickly because not a lot of people like this, but many ways. Immediately drowning. We usually see this with gillnet. And when it's towards the seafloor, they can't lift it up to the surface to breathe. So unfortunately, they will drown. Long-term starvation. Sometimes if it's over their head, In this image, you see a very skinny whale that's very pitted. That should be a robust animal. And that orange coloration on its side, that's cyamids or whale lice. You only see that in a very unhealthy animal. Chronic infection, you sometimes when the entanglements are long-term, you will get something like this. And this is an aerial shot of a humpback with a tight wrap around the peduncle, and the tail is unfortunately falling off. And then trauma and bleeding out, and we see this usually when there's a tight wrap around a younger animal and they grow into their entanglement. Get off that slide for you all. So unfortunately, we get this question all too often. Why do we care? Why does it matter? First and foremost, to improve the welfare of the individual animal. This is one of the largest threats to large whales and marine animals in general. But from a conservation standpoint, and especially in some species like the North Atlantic right whale that only have about 300-ish left, getting one animal back into the population is huge, especially something like a breeding female. Each case allows us to understand the problem better and work towards prevention. And then last and almost most important is going to be preventing ad hoc responses. Ad hoc response is when a member of the public tries to intervene and do something. And I'll be speaking to this a little more later on in the presentation, but you really want to kind of make sure that members of the public are calling hotlines around the US to make sure that trained team members are the ones acting in cases like this. We have lost trained responders. We lost a colleague, Joe Hallett, to a right whale in 2017. And these are people that have been working with these animals for a long time. So we do ask, if you ever come across an entangled animal, I will go through kind of the steps and what you need to do, but please call the hotline in that case. All right, jumping into entanglement response. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background to kind of give you a basis, but this is for the US specifically. But the Center for Coastal Studies, where I trained for 5 years, became the first organization to successfully disentangle a large whale in the US in 1984. The whale was named Ibis, and our research vessel up there is still named Ibis after that animal. But after Ibis, they started to get more and more calls and see more and more animals becoming entangled or being entangled already. So CCS teamed up with NIMS, which is National Marine Fisheries Service, and they decided to establish protocols for responses. So safety and priorities, who should be trained, the location of those teams, and levels of responders. And I'll dive into that. Now, these 4 men off to the side were kind of the ones leading the charge for that. Obviously, David Matilla and Stormy Mayo, some of you may have heard of them before. But here on the bottom left, I like to mention Ed Lyman. He joined CCS as well and joined David and Stormy. And then David and Ed came out here to Hawaii and began the effort around 2002, where Ed is still here working at the sanctuary with me. And many of you probably know him. It's a lovely photo. I love sharing that one. But the levels of responders that I mentioned on the last slide, this is what CCS and NIMS decided to come up with. And these have changed a little bit over time. Level 1, pretty much after this presentation, if you know what to look out for and what to do, you're a level 1 responder. At level 2, 3, and 4, this becomes with experience. So level 2, you do kind of a more in-depth training at one of our locations. Level 3, you'll be working with us for many years, either on the research vessel, doing specific trainings, and you can work on the inflatable that you see right over there to the right with us on an actual case. Level 4 is you can lead a disentanglement effort on any animal except a right whale. Okay, and the only delineation between level 4 and level 5 is including a right whale. I am a level 4. If I wanted to become a level 5, I would have needed to put probably about 5 more years in out east, 5 to 10. They make that delineation because right whales are different than any other species behaviorally. It's like working on a freight train. They can be very dangerous, reactive, and turn on a dime. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, we lost a colleague to a right whale in 2017. So that's why that level 4 and level 5, it takes many more years to become a level 5 for them. There's only a handful in the US. The response priorities they came up with was human safety first, whale safety, and documentation, because that's how we learn and follow up. Human safety first and foremost. If there is any chance that human safety is compromised, we can back away and leave that animal. Doesn't happen very often, but that is the first and foremost priority. Now, what's involved in a response? Many things. I'm going to break them down little by little, but entanglement detection and reporting, standing by, rapid first response, verification and assessment, disentanglement, and then documentation and follow-up. So the first thing, entanglement detection and reporting. It can be extremely hard to detect an entanglement. It's not always gear all over the body. Sometimes you'll just see a single line in that left photo hanging over the dorsal fin. The animal is very pitted, skinny. You see those high cyanide loads that I mentioned earlier. It could have injuries, it could be bleeding, or you see an animal like the one you do to the bottom right. And that is a skinny animal. We kind of call it a peanut head, big head, kind of sunken back or body. And that could have gear through the mouth, weight down below. So whenever you see animals that aren't in the best condition, it always warrants a better look. Now, this is an obvious entanglement. This is a photo from the surface of animal with a trailing a bunch of gear. Now, what it looked like below the water was something like this. And then something that's not as easy to detect is sometimes animals logging, resting on the surface. There's a buoy nearby, and they could be entangled around a pec fin or around the fluke. And it's only when the animal starts to move away that you see the buoy slowly start to go after it. Standing by, this is something that's so very important to us and something I like to kind of really hash in these presentations, is we have a hotline that we answer 24/7. Please don't call it at 3 a.m. because I will answer it. But we do have hotlines all over the US, and when people call, we try and gather as much information as possible. We ask them if they can stand by. It takes one of our teams, if you're on the East Coast, about 30 minutes, here about an hour, because we live a little bit further away from the dock, to get to the boat and get in response. We have very fast vessels that can get us there quickly, but it is very, very easy to lose an animal in these waters. It is a needle in the largest haystack in the world. So what we try and see is if people can stand by. If for some reason they cannot, we try and get a whale watch boat nearby or Coast Guard to go out. They've been both are very good with standing by for us. If a whale watch boat is there and comes across it, if they have to go in for the end of their tour, or someone needs to go to the airport, we will try and pass it off to another boat or another vessel until we can get there. Because it is so easy to lose an animal. But we always make sure that the standby vessel stays way more than 100 yards away, because you don't know how much gear that animal is trailing. And parallel the animal, do not follow, because you only get about 2 good approaches to an entangled animal before it changes its behavior. And if we lose those good approaches before we get there, it's very difficult for us to move forward with the disentanglement. So the rapid first response, verification, disentanglement, and documentation, I'm going to loop all into one, and I'm going to show you all some videos and walk you through how we go about a response. Once we get that call, once we get on the boat, and once we get there, what we do. So first and foremost, once we've arrived, we see the animal is entangled, it's confirmed. We take as much documentation as we can, and then what we're going to do is establish a control line. So control line is that tool right there. That's a grapple at the end. Depending on the size of grapple, we can use a 5-pound grapple or a 10-pound grapple to get at weighted gear or line on the surface. It has 60 feet of line to a buoy at the end. We're throwing that grapple over the entangling gear and then pulling it back and snubbing that line in the tines. We're letting that line pay out, let the buoy go, essentially marking the animal for us, so then we can get ready to get into the inflatable. So this is what it would look like after. You'd see the whale, you see the trailing gear, and then you see our buoy that is attached with the grapple to the entangling gear. Show you a couple videos of that. So this video is from Cape Cod in 2017. We're working on a humpback. A whale watch boat called it in, stood by for us. You can see we're all bundled up because it's quite cold in April. And I have the grapple in my right hand. I have the shot of line in my left. I'm looking down to make sure all that line is in front of my feet. So is Everett, my coworker, working my buoy. Because if at any time we become wrapped around that line and go in, That's kind of that. We have a safety knife on our vest and a safety knife in our pocket. So if at any point it does become wrapped, we just cut that line. So you can see we're coming up to the animal, two buoys, the animal's moving quite slowly. It's nice. What I'm going to do is prepare to throw the grapple, throw it over, and then we're going to snap it. And the animal was so kind to us in this case. All right. So the animals aren't always that calm and collected. So this is an animal here off Maui. You can see sometimes we have to get the control line, the grapple in there when they're behaving like that. And sometimes they're moving really quickly. So this is a video of our colleague Grant throwing the grapple off of our research boat here. Now watch the bucket and see how fast this line pays out once we're on. So that gives you an idea of how quickly that if we become entangled in that line, we have to make a cut because that animal is now taking that gear and going away. Okay, and one more video. I hope this will play and not lag on you because it is kind of high definition. So this is of us working on a humpback, some gear trailing off the right fluke blade. I'm throwing the grapple. My coworker Bob is working my buoy. And you can see the animal coming up. We could not see this animal, unfortunately. I know it looks clear from the drone, but we could not see it at sea level. So they were actually working through the radio telling us where the animal was when it was coming up. And you can see the grapple is attached, and now we're letting the buoy pay out and the animal take it away from us. Now, once we have that control line, this is when we're going to start kegging the animal. To keg is basically the same thing the whalers did, but instead of buoying the animal to kill it, we are trying to slow the animal down and keep it near the surface so we can start working on the animal. And those big buoys that you see there, those are A5s. They, I'm 5'11". They stand up to my chest. They're quite large buoys. Now there are two types of animals that we're working on that are entangled. There's anchored animals, meaning they have so much gear they cannot move anymore. And then there's free swimming animals, and that means they're carrying the gear with them. So this is a case that we worked on off New York. This is of an anchored animal, and sometimes this is how close we are to the animals when we're trying to buoy them. And in this case, we were trying to buoy the fluke because all the weight was on the fluke and we were trying to lift it to the surface. Similarly, I like to include this video because I'm about to get snotted in the face right about here. There it is. Doesn't smell great, I will tell you that. But this animal had 4,000 pounds of gear on its tail and could not physically lift it. So we had to get a crane from the Army Corps of Engineers to come out, their vessel to come out and lift the tail to the surface so then we could work on it. Now, if the animal's free swimming, sometimes you have to pull up pretty quickly, attach a buoy, clip in, and then hightail it out of here. You'll see this shortly. We're clipping, throwing it over, and then getting the heck out of there. And again, this is just to slow the animal down because when an animal is swimming 10 to 12 knots, it's really hard to work on that animal, although sometimes we have to at that speed. Now, ideally, once we've slowed the animal down, that's when we can start pulling up to the animal and the inflatable. As you can see, engines are always out at this point when we're attached into the gear and the animal is towing us. It's a Nantucket sleigh ride. So this video is going to show you us kegging and pulling up at the same time. So when the animals come to the surface, that's when you get the most gear towards the surface, the most slack. So that's when you take your opportunities to get closer to the animal. Again, there's no engine in the water here. The animal is towing us. You can see we're not getting very good distance on this. So the next time the animal surfaces, we start pulling up quickly, get some distance. And what we'll do is take the buoys, add them in, and then grab the furthest buoy in the back and leapfrog it forward. Because the closest you get the flotation to the animal, the harder it is for that animal to dive. All right. Now, sometimes the animals tend to react to this drag. This is a place that you don't really want to be when that happens. It's when you'll probably need to change your underpants. But if in this case, this is when we're going to back away, let the animal react to the new drag, and then come back in 5-10 minutes when it is calmed down. and then continue working. Now, ideally, the animal is calm, slowed down towards the surface. That's when we're going to cut and release. And we use long poles to extend our reach on the animal with knives on specialty knives on the end of that to make the cuts. So a couple videos. This is a whale off New York. We were able to get the tail up just occasionally and make some cuts. You can see we're kind of fishing. Sometimes we put our heads in the water. My head is in the water and I'm trying to place the knife on the line, but if anyone has been to New York Harbor, you can't really see your hand in front of your face. So that didn't really work out well. So we were just kind of fishing for it until we were able to get the crane. Now in this case, we've already made a cut. You see a bitter end or basically a cut on the right side. You can see that line in the water. And we are trying to get up higher on the left side to leave an asymmetrical bit of line in this animal's mouth. We knew this animal, it was a young animal, it wasn't in the best condition, so we didn't want to pull the line out of the mouth and possibly create areas for infection. So here I am, the whale's being a little swishy. We're trying to make a shorter cut on that left side. This is the plan. Sorry, I have two dogs. And you can see right there, the animal turned left and I dropped down really quickly so my coworker Ev could make the cut. We saw this animal a week later and it was gear free. So the next time the animal opened its mouth, ideally the asymmetrical cut just came out with the longer end pulling out that side. That is the benefit of knowing the life histories of these animals. On the East Coast, we know most of them, most all of them. Here in Hawaii, we can use an app called Happy Whale to kind of understand the life history in near real time. This is a video from here in Hawaii. Ed attached GoPros to the end of the pole. So you can see we are making a cut, tight wrap on the peduncle, and then it makes that one cut, and then you just keep going back and doing it over and over again until the animal is free. Now, if we can't get close to the animal, this is a tool called a cutting grapple. You can see looks just similar to the grapple that I showed you earlier, but there's knives on the inside of the tines. So this is me working on a right whale. Right now, it doesn't always cut immediately, so the cutting grapple is paying out. I'm looking at the line to make sure that it is not wrapped around our feet, because you can see how quickly we need to take action if so. And right now I'm putting all my weight on that buoy just to try and make a cut before I let that buoy go. And it makes the cut, and then I start hauling it back in. So you saw that little jerk that I did. That means that the line cut through, and now I'm pulling it back in to hopefully see if we got anything. You can see we're all wearing gloves because sometimes the gear that you're touching has fouling on it. And we were able to cut off about 400 feet of gear just in that one pass. So you just keep doing that when you have animals that human safety is compromised and you can't get close to. Now, here's a video of us working on a humpback. And this is kind of an oopsie moment. This is where we're using cutting grapple. It didn't cut through immediately. And because of the swell and the wind, we actually kind of pull the boat onto the whale. So you'll see us throwing the cutting grapple, pull, and we're trying to cut off that high flare off its head and then pull the boat onto it. And this is where Bob and myself, we duck, and we're trying to get ourselves underneath kind of the railing on the boat. So if any part of the whale's body comes up, it will hopefully hit the boat before us. But again, it is dangerous work, and that's what we're trained to do and prepared to do. The animals, sometimes, depending on how long they've had the gear, can be pretty frantic and respond as such. This is another cutting grapple video that kind of show that we do kind of go out in all weather. The weather doesn't look that bad here, but it was really bad. I'm getting just waves to my face. Bob's laughing at me. But it was the animal was entangled right outside the harbor. The fisherman called us and said, "Hey, I got a whale here in my gear." We came out, and you can see here in a second, the whale's going to come up, and it is very, very hard to see in this weather. But we knew that it had a buoy over the head and through the mouth with the inline through the mouth. And all we needed to do was cut off the buoy. So then the weight of the pot that was still on the sea floor would pull the line out of the mouth. So here in a second, you're going to see us point. And I didn't even see the whale. at that time, and we switched sides so we can throw. Um, and when I come up, normally you can feel the cutting grapple cut a line, but because of the swell, because of the waves, we weren't able to feel it. So you're gonna see me throw, and I actually make the cut on the first throw, but I didn't know it. So what we do is something called a quick recovery, where we grab the grapple back if the animal is still there. So throwing it over the back because we're trying to cut the line that's on the far side and cut the buoy off. So I'm dragging it back over the back. So right here, the buoy goes slack. Right there, I had made the cut, but couldn't feel it. So now we do a quick recovery, and since the whale's still there, just throw again to see if we can get the line. And jigged a little bit, we're kind of tugging on it. And we saw the animal about 10 minutes later. We were able to catch up to it, and the gear had already come out of the mouth because the buoy was cut off. Now, if we can't get close to the animal whatsoever, we have this tool, and this is only used in certain cases where human safety is compromised because of the whale's behavior or the type of gear that we cannot get to. So human safety is compromised, and if it's an embedded line that we're trying to get to, we can try and use this. This is gobbler guillotine or a broadhead cutter, and this was originally designed to basically in turkey hunting. And we said, well, if it can cut a head off a turkey, it can definitely cut a line off a whale. I'm sorry, that's graphic. But we tested a bunch of different ones on carcasses and line on those carcasses, and we settled on one brand that works really well. And I'm going to show you two videos. This is we use this in cases of tight wraps. So if there is a tight wrap on the animal that we cannot get to, usually forward, we can shoot it, and if that razor blade just nicks the line because it's under tension, it just explodes off the animal. So this was a wrap on a right whale on its head. And then this video I'll show you, this is more recent that we used it on a calf with an embedded line. And you can hear me talking to Bob that the animals are slowly coming up. It is very hard to see when you're on that plane, that surface, especially when you're not here in Hawaii. And we help out all over Alaska, East Coast, and you can see the animals coming up. And you're going to see it kind of looks like a necklace, an embedded line right there. And it's just quick like that. Now, if for any reason that we cannot finish the disentanglement that day, we use our telemetry buoy, and you can see it's that green buoy flashing in the back there. And we attach that into the entangling gear. So if weather's coming up, we're losing daylight, the animal's going into a wind line, we'll just attach that telemetry buoy and then track it in subsequent days when we can come back and finish the disentanglement. The orange buoy that you see the photo of off to the left, my dogs are wrestling. The orange buoy you see off to the left is going to be our new telemetry buoy that's coming online that is much lighter and hopefully has less holes in the satellite system for us. So when we go back to the animal, we're not having these big gaps in satellites. So jumping into the going forward, there are many different options that look promising for the future of disentanglement. And one thing I will mention, kind of the golden child of disentanglement, is ropeless gear, or some people call it on-demand fishing gear. And this is where I mentioned that buoy and that inline that stays in the C column that's attached to the pot. Ropeless gear, on-demand gear, tucks that into the trap, basically the pot. And there's a communication device on the pot, and there's a communication device on the boat. And when the fisherman is ready to haul his gear, he just presses recover. This starts to open, and then that buoy and the inline floats to the surface. So instead of it being in the water for 60 days, it's in the water for 60 seconds. Now, however, while this is the golden child of disentanglement, and some fisheries use it already in Australia, it is very expensive because not a lot of places use it. Canada has been testing it in recent years. Massachusetts just did a test this past year. I haven't heard how that has gone yet. So it is moving along, and it's got some steam right now. It kind of goes through these ebbs and flows. So we'll see, but ideally this is going to be the golden child. I would love to be out of a job tomorrow. Hopefully this will do it. There is weaker rope breaking strength, and this is being kind of championed by Amy Dalton and NEAQ, New England Aquarium. We don't know how this will work. it's also being tested. Could be the animal just breaks the line sooner, but still carries the gear with them, to be determined. And then out here in Hawaii, we are actively working on the funding for the removal of illegal fads. When we're out there, we do see them. Unfortunately, there's no one to haul up those large illegal fads, so that is something we're working on. Now the Hawaii effort, just jumping into this real fast, how am I doing on time? I think pretty good. We have 9 trained teams. We have rapid response telemetry kits on the main islands. We have caches of gear, and we have a network of responders trained in various roles. So if we have entanglement cases on Oahu, Kauai, or Big Island, Ed or myself will fly over to assist our trained responders over there. I did notice we have in the participants, we have I give a shout out to Colin Cornforth of Captain Zodiac in Kona. He's one of our trained responders and helps us out with a lot of cases and vessels over there. And I also saw we have Mimi on here from Kauai. I'm going to be seeing her shortly in a couple weeks, doing some training over there. So some great people on. So thank you guys for coming. Now, just some accomplishments from 2002 to the present. There have been over 200 responses mounted, gear removed from 40 whales. That represents a 50% success rate. That number goes up if we can get to the whale. It is very, very hard here in Hawaii because of the lees of the island. A lot of times we get calls and the animal goes off and then we don't see it again. So if we are able to get to the whale, that success rate jumps up. Of the gear that we've identified, the majority of it is fixed gear. So that's why I highlighted early on in the presentation. And this is not just a Hawaii thing that we see fixed gear majority. That is everywhere, all over the US. It is the thing that we see the most of. And of the gear that we're able to identify, we have been able to identify 14 local and 20 sets from Alaska, BC. Now, a lot of times the gear that we're seeing here, we're not able to identify because it has been on the animal for a long time and all those identifying markings have come off. So one thing I do like to mention, we are also working on this, and with my nonprofit Hawaii Uncharted, we do see a lot of cases of whale sharks being entangled in very thick gear, and it's something that we're trying to work towards different tools, modifying our whale tools for disentanglement of these very, very large gear sets on these animals. But something to look into. You can check out hawaiiuncharted.org if you're interested. So just to highlight a couple things from this upcoming season. So if you're out on the water in Maui and see us, we are using a broader use of drones. We're partnering with Ocean Alliance. They do SnotBot. And we're trying a couple things, basically extending our reach, getting the humans further away from the animal. And we're going to be trying to work with the drones with a cutting grapple to make cuts to the entangling gear. So you can see that's what this video is. It's looping. It's just dragging a grapple into the gear. And we've been testing this for a couple seasons now, and it is looking very, very promising. So we're excited. But again, it's just another tool in the toolbox. If it works, if the case warrants it, then that's when we will attempt to use it. We are suction cup tagging of animals. This helps us maintain our skills for disentanglement using the large poles, getting people comfortable with that, reaching out towards an animal. I'll talk about it in a couple slides, but what we're using with the suction cup tagging data. Doing fecal collection, continuing our photo ID and scarring studies that I mentioned earlier, and then the use of a new tool for disentanglement that I'll mention here in just a little bit. This is just a video of us tagging the whale via drone. We're also doing that. The animal hardly even knows we're there. We just kind of buzz in, drop the tag, and away the animal goes with the tag. Those are suction cups, so they come off depending on what kind of hour limit we set it for, usually 2 to 4 hours. Now this is a video of the drone actually dropping a suction cup tag on an entangled whale this last season. So again, we're trying to maintain those approaches. So I mentioned you only have 2 really good approaches to an animal before it changes its behavior. So we don't want to burn those approaches with trying to get the science. So what we can do is have the drone do that, drop a tag. So this is now collecting all the data that we want, energetics, things of that sort. And then we're also collecting blow to get the stress levels of the animal before and after disentanglement. See how the effect of a response is on the animal. That new tool for disentanglement, as I mentioned, this is the gobbler guillotine or the broadhead cutter. Just want to mention it is not a new tool specifically. It's been used for many years on the East Coast. Hasn't been used out here in Hawaii yet, but we are training the team here to be able to use it proficiently. So if the case warrants it, it is a tool in the toolbox for us. And you can see this was after last Halloween, almost a year ago. I really wanted that apple, and I got it. Um, so with the broader use of drones, just want to mention we are working with a PhD candidate, Jessie Hoffman, in collaboration with Shannon Atkinson's lab. She's with UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we're tagging those compromised animals for energetics behavior around response, like I mentioned, getting the breath analysis of the stress hormones, see the possible change with the vessel traffic with the boat approaching, getting photogrammetry of the condition, and then taking a biopsy for the more long-term stress hormones. So we can see short and long-term. So a couple videos of this is a response that we did last year. That was that same animal that we tagged. This was right towards sunset. We actually responded to that animal multiple times over multiple days. So we initially got the first call and it was an hour before sunset. So we tried to go out to see if maybe we could get a quick cut on it. Unfortunately, the animal was super evasive with a mom and calf, so acting as the escort. Um, so unfortunately, it did not work out that day, but we were able to get the drone in the air to be able to see the animal because with the way the lighting was, I was just not able to see it at that moment. This is that same animal, and unfortunately, when we got our first really good pass in multiple days, the knife just skipped right over the line. So you can see it just hopping as this video loops. It's right there, but it just hops right over the line. And unfortunately, we have these cases where we're just not successful, and this was one of them from last year. We didn't see this animal again after this third day. But to end on a good note, share a couple of videos with you. This was a case from several years ago. This was a mom with a big bundle of gear wrap around her head. Calf obviously presents different issues with this, can get in the way. Took them about 6 hours before they were able to finally get a knife into the entangling gear. So what you're seeing is we have something called a flying knife. So it sits at the end of the pole in kind of like a little sleeve. And when you hook it in, it's attached to a line. So the knife will go away with the animal. It's attached to the line that we're holding and we keep the pole. So right here, you're going to see him hook that knife in. Okay. Now, the gentleman in the bow, Lee James, he's going to hold on to the line that has the knife that's attached to the gear. And then Ed's going to pull the pole out. And here in a second, you're going to see him just jerk back. And that's when the cut is made. There it is. And then the animal went free because it was a wrap. So you can see this is the video of her after the wrap and the bundle is gone. I'm going to hopefully show you some of this. This is a big file as well. This is a case recently that Ed flew up to Dutch Harbor, Alaska to do. So again, we help out in other areas, and this was an animal that was hog-tied, so through the mouth and around the tail. And it is very, very hard lighting up there. Obviously, this was, I think, April when he went up, maybe. And what he is using is a new cool tool that he's been fashioning called the exoscope. And it's a live stream camera at the end of the pole so he can see, and you can see they have it hooked up to a monitor. So he can see and the captain of the boat can see. And you can hear Sadie telling him he's on and he's pulling it up to make the cut. And the cut is made and Sadie's very happy. It was very cute. This is a video afterwards after the animal is free. So you can see all that gear that was on the tail off. And sometimes the animals will stay in that shape of how they were tied. It's called capture myopathy. Usually after several minutes, sometimes several hours, they'll straighten out and be like, oh, I'm no longer tied like that. I can actually move normally. So this is just a quick video showing the gear off and the capture myopathy as it's sculling away with its fins. And then one of my favorite videos, this is a great drone footage from here off of Maui. And you see tight wrap around the head, knife pole goes in, cut made, and the animal zooms away. That's really what we want to see. That is the best case scenario. And with that, I will just throw some acknowledgments up there, a lot of acknowledgments because I work for the government now, so I have to. But thank you first and foremost to Maui Nui Resource Council. We really, really, truly appreciate it. And with that, I can take any questions, and I have the NOAA hotline down there for you. So this is the Hawaii hotline. And even if it's not a whale, if you're seeing an entangled turtle on the beach or anything like that, that hotline will filter you to who you need to talk to. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Just to clarify, so if this is I know we talked about like what we can do, and that's mainly like if we just as normal people see anything, it is this number, call that number. That's the big step that
Yep.
we take as citizens and bystanders.
That is that is the big step, is to call it in, to document, and to stand by. And then if anyone here on Maui is interested, we are doing, if you're a boater, if you're an on-water community, we are doing a more in-depth training on October 18th of this month at the sanctuary offices. And it's a 2-hour training to give you a little bit more information about what you can do to help us and become part of the network if that's something you're interested in.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a little bit of time, so I have a few questions I wanted to ask. The first being, kind of just talking about, right, this network that you have. So in your experience, and I guess in Hawaii, are most of the like, how do you get these reports? Are they individuals? Are they usually like, tour boats? Like, where are most of these calls coming in from?
Most of them come in from tour boats because they're the ones out there most commonly.
Okay.
They're the ones on the water the most, but we do get fishermen calling it in. We do get personal recreational boaters calling it in. We had last year an outrigger canoe call one in and stayed with
Oh,
a
wow.
spinner dolphin until our team on the Big Island could get there. So it does come from kind of all over the spectrum, but most of our calls are going to come in from the tour boats because they're the ones with the eyes on the water the most.
Makes sense. Kind of speaking to maybe like two slides before your last, or two videos before your last one, about how you kind of pursued an animal over several days. I'm just curious, do you often see like re-entanglement? I know you mentioned like in Hawaii you can somewhat track these animals. And so, do you see that happening? If do you, and if so, like is it often? Like are there reasons why?
We do see animals become entangled multiple times in their life. Out here in Hawaii, not as much just because we may not see that animal again because we have a very large population. So we can track it with if we get the fluke print or anything like that and submit it and see if that animal in the database has had histories elsewhere or if it comes back here to Hawaii and is entangled again. Now, out on the East Coast, I can speak to that a little better because the population is smaller. We know the animals and they're in a feeding ground where, we've had animals that we've worked on 4 times, sometimes more,
Hmm.
and 4 different cases, right? So they're entangled, 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 entangled. So animals do become entangled more than once in their lifetime. Out here in Hawaii, we just may not see it, but in other areas, they do see it a lot more.
Gotcha. We have a question. In case of a chain entanglement, what kinds of tools would be used to help disentangle that animal?
Oh, Lordy. So I have a funny story about that. We have not really had to deal with chain much. Obviously that one case in Alaska that you saw with the anchor, and we used a saw to cut it at the windlass, which is up at the vessel. Um, in case of the New York whale that I showed a couple clips of, that ended up having steel cable, half-inch steel cable around its fluke. It had a tree trunk of gear around it, and then once we got into the middle of it, there was steel cable, and we had never dealt with that before. Luckily, we were kind of attached to the whale that was attached to the crane of the Army Corps of Engineer boat, and we looked up at all the men looking down at us and said, "Do you have a hacksaw?" And they passed us down a hacksaw, and we ended up going through 3 hacksaws over multiple hours, but eventually got through that steel
Wow.
cable. So now we carry bolt cutters, hacksaws, and anything else we can think of to get through,
Yeah.
things of that sort.
You kind of mentioned that this took multiple hours. What is like a typical, I mean, I know every case is different, but on average, what's a typical time frame of a disentanglement effort?
Usually a disentanglement effort will take multiple hours. In the best case scenario, the fastest I've ever done it is 45 minutes. That was with an anchored animal and it was super quick, just cut the line and then you're out of there.
Mhm.
Um, but I've also worked on an animal that has been entangled for multiple years now.
Wow.
Um, and just carrying the gear for that long, and you could see the body condition degrade over
Oh,
time.
yeah.
But usually it'll ideally take you multiple hours in one day. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, with the weather we have out here, just the small lees on the island, sometimes that extends to other days. Last year we tagged a whale on the Big Island with Captain Zodiac's assistance, and then followed it to Maui, to Molokai, to Oahu.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so it varies from case to case, but ideally you can do it in multiple hours in a day.
Another question. Once the animal is released from the entanglement gear, what typically happens to the gear? Is it retrieved and disposed of? Does it just sink to the ocean floor? And the same
We
person just said, thank you for mentioning happy whale, happy face emoji.
Yes, of course. Happy Whale helps us out a lot. We love them. Yeah, so with the gear, we try and buoy it before we make any cuts. So if a cut is made, then we will try and haul the gear if it is something that we can do. If it's something too heavy, we will mark it and see if someone else can come haul it. Usually, if it's by the time they get here, they're not carrying weight on it. It's only if they pick up weight here, typically. The weight has already broken off in migration. So normally we're getting buoys and lines and things like that, and that's just stuff we can collect when we make cuts. We don't just kind of toss it overboard. That's part of our kind of understanding of the whole process of disentanglement and following up is trying to figure out where that gear is coming from. What fishery is it? Marine debris? Is it anything like that? So after a disentanglement, we have kind of like our forensics. We kind of go in and be like, okay, what's this color? What's this number? Where did it come from? So we can start to understand it a little better. But
Mm,
usually then that either gets stored at our office or on the East Coast, it goes to a NOAA fisheries storage facility.
okay.
Yeah.
Another question. Do you have any recent survivorship data on disentangled whales, whether it be in Hawaii or elsewhere?
Yeah, so there's a lot of data on that on the East Coast. So if we can get the animal free and their body condition is not too degraded at that point, the animal usually survives. We did have a case here, I think it was 2018. It was internet cable through the mouth that we believe was part of a fad. And it was really embedded in the mouth. I think I had that photo on the Why Do We Care slide. I should have mentioned it. But it was internet cable through the mouth and had to use bolt cutters to just chop it as close as we could to the face.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly thought never see that whale again. Unfortunately, it's embedded, could be
Mm,
infected,
mm.
and got a great return with Happy Whale this year. They were able to see that whale back here in Maui and with a calf. So that's a really happy story. So
Wow.
even the animals we don't think may survive, they can bounce back. They are very, very resilient.
That's amazing. Okay, thank you so much. That is love that story. That was the comment. That we are right up against the end of the hour. So thank you so much, Maria, for being with us tonight. That was really interesting and just so much to learn. So much
Of
to get to
course.
learn. So next month, our speaker, we will have our very own Jill Wirt along with Soil Thrive LLC and Maui Gold Pineapple to share the exciting progress of reef-friendly landscaping around the island. I mentioned the course, but we actually launched a test plot with Maui Gold Pineapple back in May of this year. And so we're excited to share how things have been going thus far. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, don't forget that enrollment for this last course of the year will open tomorrow. If you have any questions, just shoot us an email, get in touch with us. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. It's just rfl@mauireefs.org. And a recording of tonight's talk will be sent out via email. So again, if you want to get that replay, make sure you're on our mailing list by using the link in the chat. And we just also want to say mahalo to our sponsors and supporters who care just as much about protecting our island's ecosystems as all of you do. So mahalo, Maria. Mahalo, everybody, for joining us again. We hope to see you all next week, next month. But until then, take care. Aloha, ahui ho.